Good morning. I'll call the meeting of the National Board of Assessors to order at 9 a.m. on Thursday, May 5th, 2022. Let the record show the present from the board are Robert Early, Paul Bergeron, and myself, Daniel Hansberry. First order of business of the meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the public meeting minutes of the Board of Assessors from Thursday, April 21st, 2022, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Early has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Bergeron has seconded. Are there any errors or corrections? No. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the non-public meeting minutes from the board meeting of Thursday, April 21st, 2022, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
The motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
Second.
Second was made by Mr. Bergeron. Are there any errors or corrections?
No.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. There are no communications. This time I will recognize Mr. Turgis. Good morning,
Good morning,
Mr.
Board.
Turgis.
So the first item I have for you is a warrant for report of woodcut for the timber tax. That will come around later on for the signatures. Any questions on that?
Any questions for Mr. Turgis?
No.
No.
Just for the different types of woods, what do we have, a forester that determines the value of the woods forest? Is that?
The Department of Revenue's Timber Department determines it.
All right. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the timber tax warrant for operation number 21-315-04-T?
So moved.
That motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second was made by Mr. Bergeron. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The second item I have for you is a list of properties and the abatement amounts per the pilot agreement with Southern New Hampshire Medical Center. It's just a matter of going through their different properties based on the approved pilot agreement to correct any back and owing taxes and so forth.
So this is just an in-house correction at this point?
It's
Okay.
basically, yeah, it's basically house clean up. We gotta do it so the tax collector can process their paperwork, refunds, et cetera.
Any questions for Mr. Turgis?
Nope.
No.
Is there a motion to approve the in-house correction for the properties on attached list per pilot agreement with Southern New Hampshire Medical Center?
So moved.
Motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second was made by Mr. Bergeron. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
So the next group of things I have for you, presenting for Jennifer Zins. She was unable to make the meeting this morning. The first is acceptance of late filings for charitable and educational exemptions due to accident, mistake, or misfortune, and I believe she stated on the list why they were late. It was 4 of them.
Okay, questions for Mr. Turgis?
Well, I have one.
Mr. Bergeron?
Would you, Greg, would you know why the National Historical Society falls in the category of failure to file due to, I assume, accident? I mean, it says that they've been late for 20 years. After 1 or 2 years, you'd think they get the hang of it.
Yeah, yes. I believed Jennifer spoke with these people and said, okay, this is it. You will be filing on time from now on. She would ask the board to accept the late filing this time. I guess from talking to them, they fully admitted that they just do it late. So that But again, I believe Jennifer has spoken with them and made it very clear.
So they've been
It
put on
won't be-
notice that any further late filings will not be accepted.
Correct.
Does the board think we should maybe have a representative come in and have them give us an explanation why? I mean, this happened a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and we had a few organizations at that time that were late filing, and they were all required to come in and meet with the board. I mean, do you think that would be a good way to go? I mean, they're claiming they've been late every year for 20 years. Any thoughts on that?
I like the suggestion. I think we need to make them really understand that, you know, this isn't, we're not going to routinely provide this exemption if they don't comply with the requirements, and maybe their presence here or being called before us will help them understand the importance of doing so.
I can't imagine they haven't been spoken to in the past, if it's been 20 years, so I think bringing them someone in is a good idea.
Administratively, does that create a problem if we defer action on that one institution?
On that one, it does, because the tax bills are going out, so they would not be receiving it for the first tax bill, would not be reflective in the first tax bill.
Could we approve it and still request somebody to come in to,
Yeah.
even though it's already been approved at a later meeting?
Right.
If a vote's going to be taken, I have a question of counsel.
You go ahead.
Attorney Bolton, I'm a dues-paying member of the Nashua Historical Society, but not involved in any boards or committees. Should I recuse myself from voting on this?
I think it's probably the best practice that you do recuse yourself.
Okay. Therefore, I will recuse myself if a vote's going to be taken on this exemption.
All right, so in essence, we have a fait accompli, but we have to approve this, is what you're saying, because of the deadline.
Well, if you don't accept it, it would reflect, and later accept it, it would reflect in their final tax bill.
Which means that they would get what, a tax bill for, that's payable in July, is that what you're saying?
Correct. They would, they would receive it for December. They would receive a July tax bill. Ultimately, if it goes through and they receive the exemption, we would have to refund them plus interest for the July tax bill.
All right. Okay, so we need to talk then afterwards about having them come into a subsequent meeting then.
You
to
can certainly
address
do
this.
that.
All right. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the late filings with a recommendation for acceptance as presented per the attached page? And I'll call the roll on this one, I guess, just to make it easier. Mr. Bergeron?
Abstain.
Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, could I just clarify that I'm abstaining on the vote pertaining specifically to the Nashua Historical Society, but I support the exemptions for the other three applicants.
Okay, do you want us to divide the question, or are you okay with that
I'm okay with
explanation?
just having that in a minute.
Okay. All right. So the motion is adopted. Okay. I did cast my vote, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, Mr. Turgis?
The next item I have is the list of the religious, charitable, and educational exemptions for approval for the list supplied.
Questions for Mr. Turgis?
No.
No.
Just for the Diocese of Manchester, There are 8 Catholic churches in the city, so they would be exempt. The other accounts, what would they be, the rectories? Is that what they would be?
Yeah, anything that they are owned, used, and occupied for their purpose, or if it is leased to another exempt entity, or another exempt, qualifying exempt entity is using the property, it would be exempt.
All right, thank you. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the religious exemptions as presented per the attached list?
So moved.
Motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second was made by Mr. Bergeron. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis.
The next item I have is the city recommends approval for the exemption for veterans of foreign war.
I think the next one that we have in our booklet, just to make it, I guess, easier, are the charitable exemptions. Is that?
Okay. I was just going by the list. Yeah, they did that. They did religious, charitable, and educational.
No, we just did, no, we've got them listed separately. So religious, then charitable is next.
Oh, okay. I got ahead of you. All right, I apologize.
That's all right.
So the next thing I have is the city's recommendation for approval for the religious, charitable, and educational exemptions per the list provided.
Okay. And they've broken it out to, I'll put this together, broke it out separately, so that's why we're doing it separately then. Okay, so any questions on the charitable exemptions?
No.
No.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the charitable exemptions as presented per the attached list?
So moved.
The motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second was made by Mr. Bergeron. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The next one I have is the city's recommendation for approval for the veterans of
what?
foreign war.
One more, educational. Educational.
Oh. Okay, yep. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
All right. So the city's recommendation for approval of the educational exemptions per list supplied.
All right, so the actors, singers, and the Peacock players, what is it, because they're teaching acting skills, is that?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So is there a motion to approve the educational exemptions as presented per the attached list?
So moved.
Motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second is made by Mr. Bergeron. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis,
We'll do the foreign wars now.
this is your moment.
Yeah, the city's recommendation for approval of the exemption for the veterans of foreign war.
Any questions from Mr. Turgis?
No.
Is there a motion to approve the exemption for the veterans of foreign war?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Early made the motion, Mr. Bergeron seconded the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The next one I have for you is the city's recommendation for denial of the charitable exemptions for the accounts listed for non-qualifying uses for the exemption. That would be account 42-138, 42-140, and 39-397.
And as far as the first two accounts, office personnel did speak to someone affiliated with the organization, and they were completely clear on why it was being denied.
Yeah.
So, is there a motion to deny the charitable exemptions as presented per the attached list?
So moved.
Motion is made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
Second.
Second is made by Mr. Bergeron. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The next one I have for you is the city's recommendation for denial of educational exemptions for the listed accounts due to non-qualifying use.
Questions of Mr. Turgis?
No.
Nope.
So on the Riviera property, it says residential rental, so what, at some point they were using that either for,
They recently purchased it, and it still has a tenant that's not affiliated with the school. So they, non-qualifying use.
okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there a motion to deny the educational exemptions as presented per the attached list?
So moved.
Mr. Early made the motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bergeron made the second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Okay, does that conclude your report?
That concludes my report, unless you want to do the foreign war thing again, but I apologize for that. I got ahead of myself.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, unfinished business, there is none. Public comment period, I would remind any speaker that they are limited to 5 minutes. And then excessive repetition, irrelevant remarks are discouraged. Remarks shall be civil, rude or profane remarks are prohibited. The presiding officer has authority to terminate the remarks of any speaker when such remarks do not adhere to these rules or other applicable law. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board this morning?
Hi,
If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. Couple things. I appreciate the thought you gave to the exemption being late. I can tell you I was up at an ASB meeting, and the assessors up there are very frustrated by that, and they're coming down hard on this now because they feel it's been abused for too long, and it was an interesting discussion. They're sending out letters, firm letters saying, no more repeat violators. This is a done deal. So I think you're on the right track of tolerance, and I think I'd be generously tolerant when nonprofit or an organization undergoes a management change and somebody didn't know, maybe that year, I would be tolerant of that. But beyond that, this consistent pattern, I think, should be addressed. So I appreciate you doing that. I sent you a letter, I sent you the VTLA requesting that they keep the docket open regarding the...
Mrs. Ortolano?
Thank you very much. That they keep the docket open regarding the update that will be completed. I don't know when they'll close it, but I would anticipate the city would ask soon. I didn't send it to you, but I got a ruling on my big 6-charge lawsuit that was before the court in a 3-day trial in December. And I feel I did very well and got a pretty favorable ruling on 5 of the 6 claims. And the judge did order legal fees could be paid in this. And, it's a nice win for me, but I know it's not over because they'll probably go for reconsideration. I'm not going to, and I anticipate the city will go to the Supreme Court, and I won't get access to the data for probably another year or longer. And it leaves a lot of questions on the process that's used. But I feel the city has been particularly punishing with right to know and access to information in assessing, and that very little has changed. This started in 2018 with a property issue that I really thought, as a pretty innocent person down there researching, they would work with me and fix. A year later, when I got the emails from John Duhamel and I saw the way I was being referred to in September and October, I understood at that point how disliked I was, and they weren't going to work with me. But it took a year. And, I'm coming forward with more litigation, and I think often of my neighbors saying to me, for an entire year, you would sit there in my house and say, they'll work with me. They'll fix this. It's reasonable. And she said, I kept saying to you, they won't. They hate you. They won't work with you. They're vindictive. And it took me almost 18 months to finally conclude that that is who they were. I held out hope. And the way I fought for that property reduction was ridiculous. And then 2019, the door started slamming closed, and it was Celia Leonard writing all the rejections, which were taken into court in this. Her name is all over, I think, every one of these. And she wouldn't even work with me. I couldn't get anywhere. She was a nightmare for me. And, information closed. And the city of Nashua just wasn't referring to other assessing officers or chiefs to find out how they were handling open access. And they were clearly handling it much different. 2020, we filed the lawsuit, and we again experienced trouble with records, requests. We filed sanctions because of the sneakiness and deception of the city. We win those sanctions for a city learning that a backup tape was corrupted early on and stringing me along for 10 months, telling me they're going to give me the information when it didn't exist. And I got those sanctions. And in 2021, I'm experiencing the same thing when it came to email usage. And 18, 19, 20, and 21, what's changed? And I have a civil case I gotta bring forward, and I'm gonna go back in with one more into local court superior on RSA 33A, retention records in a violation. My Right to Know group has been after me to get a ruling on that, and I have to treat that separately. And I've tried to work with the city on that to acknowledge that there's a problem, and they won't work with me. And I hate to have to go into court. I'm gonna write an apology when I submit the lawsuit, because I don't want to keep doing it. But I want an answer, and I want to know why we're operating this way. And I feel it never ends here, and it's wrong. And it's all stems around assessing information, and it filters into other areas with just the clerk's office and access to information. I find it ridiculous, just maddening. I also noticed, so I'm going to send you the lawsuit to read. I'm going to modify my request to the BTLA to include this and write about this litigation process and what's happened and the cost of it. It's absurd what citizens have to do. I think some of our state legislators should be working on laws with citizens to change this. So, and I also noticed, and I don't know if this is a change you've made, but usually the board packets, the agenda's online and the board packet material is online as well. And it hasn't been online the last few meetings. Like I scrolled in last night and the packet isn't there. Now it was there like 3 meetings ago. It's usually there. So I don't know if they changed it so they're not putting the packet online anymore, but if you could just, I think it's helpful to me because I download the packet, I come into the meeting and I look at, the timber and the A9s and what's changing, and I can follow along. So I don't know why that's not there anymore. But I do appreciate you unsealing minutes. I do see that they're now posting them separately, which is very helpful. And I would like to know when the Pheasant Lane Mall lawsuit is going into court, I wanted to listen to that. That is a huge, huge issue for the city when it comes to commercial tax payments, because Pheasant Lane is a big taxpayer. And I believe it's not in the hands of the BTLA, that it's going into maybe Superior Court, and I haven't been able to find it. And if somebody can tell me when there's a court date for that, I'd like to know, because I'd like to go on that one. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other members of the public out in cyberspace that would care to address the board? Not hearing anything. All right. Comments by board members?
No?
I don't have any today.
Okay. All right. So, is there a motion to go into non-public session for 2 reasons? First, to discuss matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of this board, unless such person requests an open meeting. This exemption shall extend to include any application for assistance or tax abatement, or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant, pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, parenthetical C, second under 91-A, Roman numeral 2, parenthetical L, for the consideration of legal advice provided by legal counsel, either in writing or orally, to one or more members of the public body, even where legal counsel is not present.
So moved.
The motion was made by Mr. Early. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Bergeron. I'll call the roll. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Let the record show that we have entered non-public session at 9:24 a.m.
I will confirm.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Bolton, you have something for